Okay, awesome. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Know Before You Go Traveling While Undocumented webinar. My name is Nayeli Rigo Lopez. I am the coordinator for the Undocumented Student Program here at UNLV. The Undocumented Student Program, just as to add some context, is dedicated to serving our DACA, undocumented, and mixed status populations on campus. So, whether that could be through an individual appointment to talk about professional licensing or even alternative income generation options, or even just providing resource referrals, we are here to serve our students. I do want to start off by saying that we are very grateful to be holding this space in partnership with the UNLV Immigration Clinic and the Intersection. And we're especially glad that you're here with us today, whether you're undocumented or from a mixed status family, or even just an ally trying to get some more information to support your community. Thank you for joining us today. Today's session will be all about helping folks navigate traveling safely and in a way in which they're informed, especially with the shifting landscape around documentation, the real ID, enforcement, and at transit points such as airports and bus stations, or within your own city. So this is all very important information. Before we dive in, just a few quick notes. Again, this webinar will be recorded and shared afterwards. You're also welcome to drop your questions within the chat or Q&A box throughout this session. And we will hear from our guest speaker from the UNLV Immigration Clinic, who will walk us through key considerations for undocumented and mixed status travelers. And then we'll have some time at the end as well for some Q&As. So now I'm honored to introduce Ms. Aubrey Maples, who is the staff attorney for the University Legal Services, which is a part of the Thomas and Mack Legal Clinic here at UNLV. Aubrey and the team at the Immigration Clinic have been very big advocates and educators in the immigration space, and we're very grateful to have her here today. Before entering the legal profession, Aubrey was spent 15 years as an educator. Her background in teaching first focused on supporting first generation and non-traditional students as they navigated higher education at both community college and university. She's also worked in community-based education and victim advocacy in Appalachia. She graduated summa cum laude from the Duncan School of Law at Lincoln Memorial University in Tennessee, with recognition for her commitment to service in the community and the school. Honestly, Aubrey is one of my favorite people on campus, and her experience and work is so valuable. So, Aubrey, I will now pass it over to you to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for having me today, Nayeli. Let me share my screen and let's just see how this goes.
All
All
right.
right, Nayeli, are we good? I don't know. There we go. Maybe?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so hi, my name is Aubrey. I'm the attorney with University Legal Services. And today we've got some very defined objectives and we don't have a whole lot of time. So again, if you do have questions, please drop them in the chat. If there are some that we can't get to during the chat, perhaps we can put together some written answers and Nayeli can publish them in her next newsletter. I'd like to make sure that everybody has a chance to have their questions answered. In the alternative, if you are a current student at UNLV, and we'll go into this a little bit later at the end of the presentation, you have the opportunity to speak with me directly through a consultation. And we will have the QR code available so that you can get in line for that consultation. All right. So today we're going to talk about three different things. We're going to talk about real ID requirements. These go into effect on May 7th. We're going to discuss the pitfalls and precautions that one should take while traveling, and then how to best prepare. All right, so the real ID is fairly easy to identify. These are just mostly state identification documents. These could be driver's license or these could be state identification cards. If you pull out your state issued identification and it's got a star in the corner, then you're good. If not, well, then you're going to have to maybe look at some alternative documents. All right. So the thing of it is that for most folks who are undocumented or who perhaps have an irregular immigration status, these folks have limited access to Nevada issued real ID cards. All right. In order to qualify for a real ID, you have to have the ability to demonstrate certain immigration statuses. This can include DACA. This can include folks with lawful permanent residency, folks who have OPT, those sorts of things. The requirement to travel through TSA, this is like just through airplanes, does not apply to children under 18. So if you have a kid who's under 18, you don't have to worry about getting a real ID compliant identification for them. If you do not have access to a state-issued real ID card, some alternative documents might include a passport, either one issued by the US government or by a foreign government, a permanent resident card, this is sometimes called a green card, an employment authorization card, this is sometimes called a work permit, or a border crossing card. And this is so that you can travel inside of the United States. This is what gets you through that TSA checkpoint, right, as you're coming into the security clearance section. If you don't have any of these documents, there are some other documents that are available. Please visit the website, and those lists all of the documents that might be available to you for a TSA checkpoint for a real ID. All right. That said, generally for travel, just don't. I mean, right now the news is awash with folks, including US citizens, who are detained for secondary inspection, even while traveling domestically. So traveling by air right now is very problematic for a lot of people. Traveling internationally for a lot of people is problematic, even US citizens. So we encourage everybody to be very mindful and to truly consider whether or not international travel is in your best interest at this time. Because CBP, Customs and Border Protection, is the final decision maker. They are the ones who allow you to re-enter the United States after an absence, and their word is law. There is no way to appeal whatever they have said. All right. Now, depending on your individual immigration status, CBP has options about what to do with you. If you are traveling on advanced parole or on parole, such as what happens often with DACA advanced parole, they do not have to let you back in, period. They can just be having a bad day and not let you back in, right? If you're traveling on a visa, they do not have to let you back in. And this is any kind of visa. This could be an F1 visa. This can be an H1B visa. This can be any kind of visa. If you have lawful permanent residency, again, a green card, you may experience pressure to abandon your residency at the border checkpoints. You may be placed into removal proceedings. These are options that are available to CBP, okay? Even US citizens may have to prove their citizenship above and beyond possessing a US passport. That said, they do eventually have to let citizens in, probably, eventually, all right? So, but right now folks are being redirected to secondary inspection, and it is a stressful process, even for people whose documents are all in a row, they don't have any criminal history. So we just generally recommend that folks limit their travel at this time. We recommend that everybody who's looking at international travel consult with an experienced immigration attorney before leaving the United States, especially if there is any criminal history in your background, any criminal history. Even if a judge has told you that it's been sealed or expunged, even if a lawyer has told you you never have to admit it again, even if it happened when you were a juvenile, any degree of criminal activity whatsoever, you really absolutely need to speak with an attorney before you leave the United States. Because right now, any excuse is good enough for folks to be not let back into the United States. It's a matter of being mindful and being prepared. Be aware of emergency landings and layovers. So for example, if you're traveling to Hawaii and you have DACA, technically that's within the United States. But if that plane has an emergency landing and has to land in another country, all of a sudden you are outside of the United States without advanced parole, and this can affect your ability to re-enter the United States. So again, it's better to be mindful than to be sorry later. All right. As I mentioned earlier, past criminal activity is likely to trigger increased security. And this criminal activity can occur inside of the United States or in another country, including your home country. Some big things to look for is whether or not you've ever been arrested, regardless of whether or not there was a conviction, regardless if the charges were dismissed. This can be sufficient for CBP to deny you entry. Driving citations, including speeding, especially if there were drugs or alcohol involved, is another trigger that can lead to you not being allowed to re-enter the United States. Civil disobedience, including protests, has recently become a means for people to be excluded from the United States. The current administration has identified some forms of speech as being against the government interest, but there is not necessarily guidelines as to what speech in itself is not in the United States' best interest. So right now, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression is under attack, and you need to be aware of your social media posts, your publications, and your freedom of expression. It may be used against you to keep you from being returned to keep you from being allowed back into the United States. All right, so travel, your ease of travel will depend ultimately on your status. All right, so in order to have this conversation, we have to have a quick law school class on the Fourth Amendment. This is really quick. This is really like down and dirty. You will not pass the bar questions on this presentation. All right. So the Fourth Amendment is a constitutional amendment. This means it is the law of the land. This means that it applies to everyone, regardless of immigration status. I don't care what the news media is saying right now. I don't care what social media or sound bites are saying. The Constitution applies to everyone inside of the United States, regardless of their criminal history, regardless of their immigration status. Everyone has the protections of the Constitution. That's the reason we have it. All right. The Fourth Amendment in particular protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures from the government. Within that phrase, there are two words that have different meanings: unreasonable and government. Unreasonable may not mean the same thing in every context. It's primarily driven by location. So somebody's home has a different degree of what is measured as unreasonable versus what happens in an airport. It just depends on the location. And what is defined as unreasonable can be affected by things like national security interests or probable cause of criminal activity. All right. In which case, depending on the circumstances, the government official that's doing the search may only need reasonable suspicion, being able to articulate why they think it's necessary to conduct a search, or just suspicion, which is a lot more amorphous and nobody can really define it. It's more of a, oh, if you see it, you'll know what it is kind of vibe rather than something that's articulated. And unfortunately, when you're in an airport, CBP operates a lot on vibes. All right. So their definition of suspicion can be, again, pretty amorphous. And what is unreasonable is often curtailed by the use of a warrant. There are two different kinds of warrants. There's administrative warrants. These are what's often used by ICE, or a judicial warrant. This is what's used by law enforcement, such as Las Vegas Metro PD. The difference between the two of them is that for a judicial warrant, a law enforcement officer has gone to a judge and said, we think this particular person may have committed a crime. Here's the initial evidence that we have, and we would like to search this person or search their property to make sure that we can get the rest of the evidence that we need to prosecute this individual. There is judicial oversight. Law enforcement has had to go to a judge and say, here's our evidence, and the judge has to agree there is enough evidence there to warrant the search of a person or their home. ICE doesn't work that way. ICE just has their buddy sign a piece of paper. There's no oversight, there's no protection, there's no consideration of the Fourth Amendment. All right. So again, what is unreasonable is shaped by all of these different forces. All right. And then when we talk about government is not just necessarily people who are sitting in Congress or people who are sitting in a White House, or people who are sitting in our state legislature. This also includes government actors, and this includes law enforcement, including campus law enforcement, ICE, CBP, and anybody who operates within the auspices and the power of the government, whether it be state, local, or national. All right, and this is a chart that kind of outlines the spectrum of how the Fourth Amendment works and the relative Fourth Amendment protections that a person might have in different places. You have the most Fourth Amendment protections in your home. That's the place that our government has said is most protected. It is the place where you must have a judicial warrant to enter. It is the most protection you have. And then it kind of goes downhill from there. All right. When you are in an airport, you have very limited protections under the Fourth Amendment. And this is in the name of national security. On 9/11, people blew up buildings because they had access to airlines. At that time, the laws changed to allow TSA and Customs and Border Patrol to have more access to people to search them to make sure that everybody on a plane is safe. And again, so that more people within our country are safe. That does mean that you give up a lot of your Fourth Amendment protections when you fly by air. When you when you travel by car or bus or train, you have slightly less protections, but it's more than what you would have on an airplane. And the reason for this is because you are accessing a public road, you are operating a vehicle in a public space, so it's presumed that you give up some of your right to privacy and your protections in order to share this space with others. All right. In our government, within 100 miles of the border, law enforcement has more access to you and your person than they would outside of that 100-mile range. And again, this is in the name of national security. They use it for border security. So don't go within 100 miles of the border. That's going to be the easiest way to navigate that. But in all of these cases, you have the right to remain silent, sort of. In Nevada, a law enforcement officer can ask your name. This is somebody from like Clark County Sheriff's Department, Las Vegas Metro Police Department. Somebody that's a law enforcement officer from Nevada can ask anybody's name. All right. And you're required to provide it. Everybody else, you don't have to provide anything. Does that mean it's going to be more likely that you're detained? Yes. But your remaining silent will be the best way to protect you in most cases. All right. There are some things that you could and should ask people who are trying to detain you. The first being, am I being detained? Am I free to leave? And if they answer yes, well, then you just need to turn around and silently leave. Do not escalate the situation. You can always ask, do you have a warrant signed by a judge? And the answer is no, you can leave. You know, that's when I would ask, well, then am I free to go? If you're talking to ICE, they're going to say no, just so that you know. They're going to say that no, you can't leave. All right. You can say, I do not consent to a search. They may still search you anyway, especially if law enforcement thinks that there may have been a crime. All right. But you can say, I do not consent to a search. You can say, I want to speak with my attorney, but then you have to be silent after that. All right. Sometimes law enforcement will say things like, you know, oh, I have a warrant. It's in my car. You want to step out to my car? And I can show it to you in my car. That's a ploy to get you out of your home so that they can detain you. Oh, well, you can have your one phone call sooner if you use your phone. That's to gain access to your phone so they can use the evidence on your phone against you. So it's one of those situations where you have to know your rights and then be willing to exercise them. It's important that you do not lie to law enforcement of whatever variety that is. It's better to remain silent. Do not sign anything at any airport or any place without speaking to an attorney first. Sometimes people are very confused and they may be told that a particular document is one thing by a government official. In reality, it's something different. We've seen instances lately where people have given up their US residency because they didn't understand what they were signing. So it's important that you speak with an attorney before you sign anything. And then this is probably most important, that you do not provide false documents. This includes that fake ID you've got to buy alcohol. Don't carry that with you. Don't use it. Um, the presence of false documents is something that can be used against you. All right. All right. So if you are undocumented, we recommend that you do not travel, particularly internationally if you leave the United States. When you leave with advanced parole is permission to leave the United States without triggering an admission bar when you come back. It is not permission to come back into the United States. Remember earlier we were talking about CBP can just deny you entry for any reason or no reason? Even if you have advanced parole, they cannot let you back in. All right. So if you travel outside of the United States without advanced parole and you are undocumented, it will trigger an admission bar. All right. This bar will prevent your re-entry to the United States for 3 or 10 years, or it may be a permanent bar to admission, depending on your individual circumstances. So if you're going to leave the United States, we recommend that you leave with advanced parole. Not everybody may be eligible for advanced parole. Advanced parole is discretionary. That means the government may or may not approve your application for advanced parole. And right now, the application for advanced parole is $560. So it's an expensive sort of gamble for not being allowed to come back in. So every single time I have a client in my office who's asking to apply for advanced parole, I ask them, what is your plan B? What is your plan for if you are not allowed back into the United States? Do you have a place to go? Do you have a place to stay? Do you have a way to complete your studies from outside of the United States? And this is not to scare people. This is to prepare them so that they can make an informed choice. Travel as an international student is not something that we had discussed initially when we formulated this presentation, but there have been a number of questions, especially here lately when folks' visas are being revoked. So we decided to include some of these things in order to help international students with their planning. If you travel as an international student, again, I recommend that you don't. Unless you absolutely have to, do not leave the United States right now. It is very difficult to get people back in if they've left the United States. Sometimes it will be impossible. We have had F1 students, we've had J1 students, we've had H1B folks not allowed back into the United States after international travel. So I encourage any international students who are watching this presentation to be mindful and to really truly consider whether or not international travel is in their best interest at this time. If you decide to leave, make sure you have evidence that you have maintained your status in the United States, have evidence of your ties to the home country, and be mindful of your social media and publications. These have all been used against international students as they return to the United States to prevent them from returning. And again, plan for what's going to happen if you are detained and or removed, because this is our reality. If you're in the United States and you have a cat, who's going to take care of your cat if you're not allowed back into the United States? These are the kinds of questions that you need to ask and prepare for. All right. Travel with lawful permanent residency. This is for folks who have a green card. These folks are still subject to scrutiny when they travel, especially if there's any criminal history or if there was any irregularities in their adjustment, or if they have been outside of the United States for 6 months or more in the last 365 days. Again, folks need to plan for detention and or removal proceedings. Folks who have a green card should be allowed to see a judge, but are likely to remain detained until that hearing. What we've been seeing more often is that folks who are encountering CBPs are being pressured to give up their US residency at the airport, signing a piece of paper and giving up their green card. So again, it's important not to sign anything until you speak with an attorney. Even travel as a US citizen is problematic these days. There are reports of US citizens being subject to secondary inspection, primarily at airports. CBP is required to eventually let US citizen travelers into the US. Probably. Again, right now things are kind of in flux, so probably. You may have a long time in detention, being detained in secondary inspection, where people may ask you invasive questions. They may ask to see your phone. You are not protected very much by the Fourth Amendment when you are in secondary inspection. So that's something that you need to be aware of. And you may be referred to state or federal law enforcement instead of being allowed to go home. So that's just something, again, that you need to be prepared for. So one of the things that we've been asked about specifically are documents. Make sure you have the original unaltered documents when you travel. If something is damaged, replace it before you travel, and then check the passport requirements about the country that you're traveling to, and to make sure that you can return to the United States. If you are traveling on advance parole, again, this is for folks who have like DACA, make sure you have the original and a copy of everything. Your application, any supporting documents, the advance parole permission slip. Make sure you have the original and a copy. All right. If you do not have the original and a copy, the folks at CBP, when you come back across the border, can keep the original of anything, including birth certificates. So it's important to make sure you have the original and a copy. And then we recommend that you have evidence that you did whatever you told the government you were traveling internationally to do. If you were going to see a relative, you should have printed out pictures of you seeing that relative. If you told the government that you were traveling internationally to go to a conference, you should have evidence of your attendance at that conference. If you told the government you were traveling for a medical procedure, you should have evidence of that medical procedure. You should have evidence you did what you told the government you were going to do. All right. If you are traveling on a visa, this is primarily for folks who have like international students or H-1B status. Make sure you have evidence, again, of maintaining your status and evidence of your stated purpose of travel. So again, if you're traveling for conference invitations, further travel plans, this is more like of a B1, B2 situation. So for example, if you're entering the United States on a B2 visitor's visa to visit family, make sure you have your plans to leave the country present with you when you enter. Again, because these are optional and you do not have to be let in. If you are a lawful permanent resident and you plan on extended travel, file for a reentry permit at least 60 days before your plan to travel. You have to be in the United States when you file for this reentry permit, and you have to be in the United States for the associated biometrics. These are requirements. You can have the reentry permit delivered to an embassy outside of the United States, but you have to do all of the preliminary things inside of the United States before you travel. And there's been a lot of questions on social media about telephones and electronics. You need to understand there is limited Fourth Amendment protection at the border. This means that CBP has the right to search electronics at the border, at the airport. The degree of search depends on a couple of different things: the traveler status and the degree of suspicion that the agent has. Because remember earlier, we were talking about suspicion being this kind of amorphous thing that nobody can really define. You'll know it if you see it. If the agent is suspicious, then the agent can search your phone. This may include a complete search of your phone, including your emails, your text messages, your social media activity, and they can download it for later analysis. You have a limited ability to refuse this search. It also applies to US citizens. US citizens can refuse the search. They can, but it often means that CBP will confiscate your phone and not give it back. So you need to be aware of these things. The information that is on the devices can and will be used against a traveler. Right? This includes comments to a friend that you might be checking out a school while you're traveling inside the United States. Well, then that may sound like you're trying to attend a school to CBP, and that's in violation of your visitor's visa. They can deny you entry and revoke your visitor's visa. So it's just important that you're very mindful about what is on your phone, your communications with others, and the understanding that CBP will go through your phone. All right. That said, what happens on the internet is public and permanent. That's how the internet was designed. And right now, the freedom of speech and expression is currently being weaponized. It's being weaponized against immigrants, it's being weaponized against visitors, it's being weaponized against US citizens. So you need to be aware that this is happening. And I've had a couple of folks who said, oh, well, but I, for whatever reason, am somehow special. And so the government wouldn't do that to me. The reality of it is the government can and will use anything it can against you to reach its own ends. So you need to be aware that this is happening. And again, be mindful and maybe not put yourself in situations where the government can have access to your phone or social media. That's just one of those things where you're going to have to make an informed choice on your end. That said, do not try to scrub or sanitize your digital footprint. It's not going to work. Again, the internet is public and permanent. It was designed to be public and permanent. You cannot go and delete your posts and think that they will go away. They're out there. It exists. You just have to be mindful about it. And then you also have to be mindful about the publications, especially since we're in a university setting, that your publications can be used against you. So again, depending on your own individual line of research, what you've contributed to, you may use that information to help inform your choices about whether or not travel is appropriate for you at this time. And so just, again, be mindful. And then ultimately, create a safety plan. We do this to mitigate damage. All right. So thing one, consult with an experienced immigration attorney before you travel. This is not TikTok. This is not Reddit. This is not Instagram. This is not your friend's brother who this, that, or the other. You need to speak with an experienced immigration attorney. And I need you to be honest. Do not try to sugarcoat things. Your attorneys have heard some pretty gnarly things. There is absolutely very little that you can say to me that's going to surprise me. Okay? So I need you to be honest. Attorneys cannot help you if they are working blind. We can only give you our opinions on the choices and the possible consequences of those choices if we know what is really going on. And we can only advise you on an appropriate course of action based on the facts as we know them. If you have different facts, that may change our analysis. So again, please be honest with the attorneys. Make sure you share your travel itinerary with people both inside and outside of the United States. Have copies of your documents, including your passport, your birth certificate, and any other documents which may vary depending on your immigration status. So for example, if you're traveling on DACA AP, you're also going to want to have copies of documents that establish your physical presence inside the United States for at least the last 2 years, preferably for the last 10 years. All right. So that's, again, another reason why you need to speak with an attorney so they can help you decide which documents need to be in order before you travel. Set check-in points with family and friends so that they will know when you should contact them. So when I have folks who are traveling on DACA AP, I have them text me when they get to the airport. I have them text me when they get onto the plane. I have them text me when they get off the plane. I have them text me when they get in line for customs. And then I have them text me when they leave customs. And that's not to be their babysitter. It's so that if something goes wrong, I know about when something went wrong. All right. And then that would help me figure out where they are in this process to be able to find them. All right. So it's important that you have this kind of safety plan set up with your family and friends so that they will know how long to wait before they contact your attorney. And they will know how to get copies of your documents to that attorney so that the attorney can be in a better position to help you or find you, depending on your situation. All right. And then again, what is your plan if you are detained? Do you want to fight it? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes. Do you have a third country if your home country is not a safe country to be returned to? Can you go to a third country? What kind of documents may you need? So, for example, if you have citizenship in another country or residency in another country, that is a place that you could be removed to if you can't go back to your home country. Is this a safe avenue? Do you have resources there? These are the things that you have to think about before traveling in any situation at this stage of the game. All right. All right. So University Legal Services is something that is available to current UNLV students and their qualified family members. We also offer services to select staff who earn less than $80,000 a year. We are free. This means that the legal consultation that I provide is free. This means that if we bring you on as a client, you will not pay any lawyer fees. You do not pay photocopy fees. You do not pay FedEx fees. I go with you to USCIS interviews. I support you. You do not ever have to pay for legal services. Now, if I'm filing an application for you, you do have to pay the USCIS filing fees and anything that's incidental to that. Sometimes, like there's a medical exam or passports or translation services. Those are things you would have to pay for. But for the consultation, it is free. There is a bit of a waiting list right now, but the consultation is free. We also do DACA renewal for Nevada residents. You have to come in and it is on a paper form, but I'm able to do most of it over Zoom. So there's only just one trip in, and the turnaround on that is pretty fast. That said, I do have to let everybody know that not everybody who qualifies for our services may receive representation, and that is surely because of capacity. I am the only attorney for University Legal Services. I am efficient, but there's only so much I can take on before it becomes an ethical issue. All right. So, Nayeli, do we have questions?
Yes, I see two. So the first one was, would using your own foreign passport make you more of a target? And I assume this is for air travel.
Um, Maybe. We have had some reports about folks being stopped doing domestic travel inside of the United States. This is not just like at an international border or crossing back into the border. This is travel within the United States. Recently, I was just in San Antonio and there was a announcement going on the air side of TSA that said that anybody was subject to search at any time. So TSA and ICE may be more active than in some states than others. It's just something to be aware of, and there could be a risk. But the thing of it is you will not be allowed onto a plane, period, unless you have a form of real ID after May 7th. And if the only thing you have access to is a foreign passport and travel is necessary, then that is what you have to use.
The other question we got was, what if I delete my social media account? Will that erase completely?
No, no. Even if you delete something off of social media, it is still on like Instagram servers or TikTok servers. And if you are already on a federal watch list, they've already gotten the evidence that they need against you. Deleting social media posts will not be helpful. In fact, it looks kind of sus, especially if you have like great huge holes in your social media. It's much more important that you are honest with your attorney when you meet with them and you say, okay, I've made these posts on these days and this is what they said. And I'm concerned that it would violate what this administration has identified as operating in opposition to the US government or harming their interests. Again, those are really fluid terms that we don't really have a lot of guidance on what that means. We have heard that, speaking up in support of other organizations or other governments may be construed as terrorists, support for terrorists. Um, Whether that actually is or not, that's kind of up to the courts to decide. And that there is litigation in process now to try to determine what this is actually meaning. But I guess that comes back to the question, do you want to be the test case?
I think you just, with that last part, answered the other question we got, which is what should we avoid having on our phones or avoid having on our social media? I think you answered that. Do you have anything else to add?
I think that just being mindful right now is the most proactive way that you can keep yourself safe, right? I would be the first person to stand in front of anybody and protect your freedom of speech and your freedom of expression. Those are fundamental rights of America. This is also very trying times, and a lot of our constitutional rights are under attack. So again, do you want to be the test case?
I don't think we have any other questions, but folks, you're still welcome to type any into the chat or the Q&A feature. Um, I think this is all very important information, and I know it's a very difficult time that we're living in, and a lot of this is stuff that, I wish we didn't need to hear. But unfortunately, this is, like you said, it's our reality. And, as I think it's important to get all the information up front and make an informed decision if we have to. Um, I understand there could be situations where you have a family member in California who's, sick and in the process of passing away, and you have to decide, well, am I going to take a risk in going, or do I want to stay here and stay put and, still, live with that? And these are very, horrible, horrible positions to be in, but it's important to be able to make an informed decision prior to traveling.
Yeah. And again, please do not rely on social media to make an informed choice. There are attorneys out there on TikTok, there are attorneys out there on Instagram who are offering legal advice. There are also people out there who say they are attorneys or who say that they are offering legal advice, but it's not really. I had a potential client who contacted me and said, "Oh, but I saw on TikTok that if I just take my papers to the border and turn them into the border guards, that they'll give me a green card." No, no, that's not how that works. That's a one-way ticket back to your home country, is how that's going to end up. But because this person saw it on TikTok or ran their facts through Chat GPT, um, they had a unrealistic expectation of what the immigration process might look like. So again, I highly recommend that you reach out. All right. I'm very friendly. I don't bite. There are times where I have to say, I am so very, very sorry because I can't help people, but I'm going to be honest with you.
Yes, and we truly appreciate you for that, Aubrey. I think the Immigration Clinic and University Legal Services is such a really important resource that we have on campus, and we're so glad that our students are able to get advantage or take advantage of it. And understanding that there's definitely a lot more folks trying to seek out help than there are of you. So we appreciate you and your time, and I I encourage, folks on this call to share this resource with other individuals who may not know about it or thought they weren't eligible for it. If y'all have any questions, their staff is very friendly, and they'd be happy to provide any clarification as needed. Um, we'll wait a couple more minutes to see if any other questions come through. In the meantime, though, I do want to provide some information on some links that I shared in the chat. There were several of them, and I do encourage you to open these up now and save them prior to the call ending so that you're able to save them in your browser. Because once the call is done, you won't have access to the chat anymore. But some of these resources are, well, they're all online resources and they come from different kinds of organizations, but they're all organizations that I frequently go to get some of this information. So the first one is from Immigrants Rising. This is a national org, and they put together a guide for undocumented individuals traveling in the US. They kind of talk about the same information that we shared, but they go into some additional detail in some pieces. So I also encourage you to check that out. There's also Informed Immigrant put together a traveling with advanced parole like guidebook. I would also suggest checking that out if you yourself are a DACA recipient or if you know anyone who has DACA and is thinking about going on advanced parole. Definitely point them to that resource, but also encourage them to meet with Aubrey or an attorney prior to making that decision and plans. Um, we also have some information on Know Your Rights. Um, through the ACLU of Nevada. This is based off of their website, and they've also included information about enforcement at the airport, which is can be helpful as well. And then the last one I'm going to include is the ACLU's information on the 100-mile border zone, so that you're also aware of that. And look at those additional details and information. I know this is a lot of information, so definitely sit with it, think about things. It's always important to sleep on some on big decisions for a couple of days and maybe talk to a couple trusted individuals and talk things through with them, as well as like legal experts and attorneys to see if they can provide some guidance. But ultimately, we want you to make an informed decision, be able to think about those like preparedness pieces, right, and be able to think about the different backup plans and ways in which you can be prepared in case things go wrong. But hopefully, that's not the case. Ultimately, though, we want to make sure that you know of your individual risks, right? Because it's different for everyone. So look through these resources. We also encourage you again to seek out the UNLV Immigration Clinic. I will also put my information so that in the chat so that you can get in contact with me as well if you would like to connect with the undocumented student program. We do have individual appointments that you can schedule, and we put together these kinds of events pretty frequently. I think, especially now with how everything's going, we are trying to address the various kinds of questions that we get. We had been receiving a lot of questions about travel, and so had Aubrey. So we decided, that it would be an appropriate time to host something like this. So as things progress, we will host different kinds of events and informational webinars, and most of them will probably be online just to, be the safest that we can be with our audience and attendees. Um, but yes, I put my email, my office line, and our website in the chat. I think it's sent a little funky, so I'm going to send it again. Um, but you're welcome to reach out, of course. Um, I'll give it a couple more seconds in case anyone has any last minute questions. Otherwise, if you have, very specific individual personal questions, we would encourage you to chat with Aubrey individually and setting up that consultation to talk about that privately. But we can answer any broad general questions. We have a couple more minutes left. Is there any last comments that you would like to provide, Aubrey? Mhm.
Just be safe, be mindful, know your rights, talk to an attorney, try to avoid TikTok. I mean, I don't know what else I could say. Just be mindful.
Absolutely. I think I see, let me see. Oh, I see one question that came up. It says, would there be any concerns with a mixed status family traveling domestically to another state?
We've kind of touched on that a little bit. Um, Folks who are undocumented are at more risk than folks who are not. There is reports of folks who are undocumented being stopped, detained, and ordered removed while participating in domestic travel, like within the interior of the United States. It depends a lot on whether or not local airports have agreements to cooperate with ICE within their premises. And that's something that you might have to research depending on the individual airport. Um, but again, it's not a zero risk situation. Nothing right now is a zero risk situation. So it's one of those situations where you're going to have to weigh the circumstances for each member of your family before you travel.
Yeah. Any other questions? Um, Well, we hope that this information was helpful. Thank you for joining. And again, as a reminder, we will upload today's conversation onto our USP YouTube channel so that you can go back and look at that and review it and share it with anyone else who maybe wasn't available to attend. So that will be posted within the next few days. We will also, post any other information through our social media about upcoming events or resources. So definitely feel free to follow us. I believe both UNLV Immigration Clinic as well as the Undocumented Student Program are on at least Facebook and Instagram. So y'all can follow us through there. We encourage you to stay safe, stay informed, and we hope to see you again soon at another event. So again, thank you for joining, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. And I will go ahead and stop recording.